Too many elk are a problem for ranchers in eastern Wyoming. There's been some resolution in the Cody Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Temple issue, well, sort of. And Rod Miller recalls the time he lost a bet with a convicted white nationalist. Bringing you these stories and more from Wyoming's largest news organization, I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily. There are apparently too many elk, particularly in eastern and northeastern Wyoming, and lawmakers, ranchers, hunters, and the Wyoming Department of Game and Fish are in a quandary over how to handle it. Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that elk populations are 3 or 4 times over the Wyoming Game and Fish Department's herd objective numbers on those regions, and some ranchers, he said, are starting to feel overrun.
They don't have the natural predator pressure from wolves, and grizzly bears that elk in the more northwestern part of Wyoming do. And then a lot of the land is private, so hunters can have trouble getting access to hunt elk. So the elk population has really been exploding out here. And the ranchers are, and I think justifiably so, they're starting to complain about things like elk are coming in and eating all their grass, raiding their haystacks, crashing through their fences, doing things like that. And then the hunters on the other side are saying, well, maybe if we had more access to the land, we could kill more elk.
Game and Fish Chief Game Warden Rick King said the agency has several tools in its toolbox for possibly dealing with an overabundance of elk. He said that could include longer hunting seasons and, in some places, lethal take permits for elk on private property, either by game agents or private contractors. It wasn't entirely clear to many of those at this week's Cody Planning and Zoning Board meeting what actually had been decided for a controversial Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple proposed for the city. There's still disagreement about the results of these meetings, but Cody City staff, members of the church, and the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board all say the church has final approval to build, including a 77-foot steeple that's been the focus of months of local opposition. But Cowboy State Daily's Leo Wolfson points out that the irony of that determination is that the Planning and Zoning Board didn't specifically address the steeple in a Tuesday vote to greenlight the temple project.
Through discussions with Cody City staff and the chairman of the P&Z board, Cowboy State Daily has learned that the city views that the project has now been completed because the issue of the tower height was never resolved. And because that issue was never resolved, Carson Rowley, who's the chairman of the board, told me that he believes that it's basically a done deal. He doesn't expect it to come before the P&Z board anymore.
Terry Skinner, a member of Protect Our Cody Neighborhoods, a group opposed to the temple location, said the group is exploring and pursuing legal options. A new Colorado law raising the legal age to buy a firearm in that state from 18 to 21 has already been blocked by a federal judge. But University of Wyoming law professor George Moskery, director of UW's Firearms Research Center, told Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines that he's certain that the law will be proven unconstitutional.
An 18-year-old person is an emancipated adult. They can serve in the military. They should be able to purchase a firearm.
The law wasn't in effect long enough to make any real difference before it was hit with an injunction, but it's another example of continuing tension over gun rights between Colorado's mostly rural West Slope populations and its Front Range metropolitan population. And I'll be back with more news right after this.
At Hilltop Bank, we understand that buying a home is a big decision. That's why we're here to be your trusted partner on the path to home ownership. Our experienced mortgage team will guide you every step of the way, from pre-approval to closing. We offer competitive rates and a wide variety of home loan options to best suit your needs. With our local knowledge and personalized service, you'll feel confident and comfortable throughout the entire home buying process. Contact us today to start your journey toward home ownership. Hilltop Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
A new national poll shows the clear difference in priority between Republicans and Democrats. Cowboy State Daily's Kevin Kilo reports that while Democrats, according to an NPR survey, by an overwhelming margin believe climate change is the top priority, Republicans believe the economy has to come first.
I spoke to Democrats and Republicans here in Wyoming. They really kind of talked about the fact that there is a connection between the economy and addressing climate change, and you don't necessarily have to pick one or the other.
Natroni County Representative Tom Walters told Cowboy State Daily that you can't afford to protect the environment with a weak economy. He said, quote, "We're a small contributor to climate change if it's human caused at all, so we absolutely have to focus on the economy." And in Rod Miller's column this week, he recalls that time that he lost a bet to he called him a white supremacist knuckle dragger.
The column is self-explanatory. It will give you the details about how 100 of my dollars ended up in James Johnson's pocket. In 2020, he ran for the city council. He's totally unqualified. He was a member of the sort of right-wing MAGA knitting circle that was in Cheyenne at the time. These guys dressed up in camo and bulletproof vests and carried baseball bats up and down the street to protect the Republican headquarters. And James Johnson was one of those guys. As he was running for city council, I was picking at him. We got into this like a jousting match online. Finally, I challenged him to a bet. I bet him $100 he would come in last place in the primary for Ward 2, I think, and get less than 10% of the vote. Well, come to find out he got 11%, but still came in last. So I paid the bet off. A couple of weeks after the primary, I met him at a brew pub, wrote him a check for the $100 because I didn't want that guy saying Rod Miller doesn't pay his debts. I had a record of it. And he deposited the check in his campaign account. He subsequently has gone to Idaho. I hope he used my $100 for gas money, where he got busted trying to break up a pride rally and got convicted of conspiracy, spent some time in jail. And now James Johnson and some of his Patriot Front buddies are suing the infiltrator who outed them as neo-Nazis and got them busted. And they lost their jobs and their families aren't talking to them and stuff. So they're suing this guy. And I think if my $100 had any part in bringing that about, best money I ever spent.
And that's today's news. You can read about all of these stories and more on cowboystatedaily.com. That's Wyoming's largest and most read news source. Sign up today for our free daily newsletter and get unlimited access to unrivaled coverage of what's going on in the Cowboy State. I'm Wendy Core for Cowboy State Daily.